So each year, the Macdonald-Laurier Institute looks back or what had the greatest impact on Canadian federal public policy over the last 12 months. Now just think for a second. Who do you think that is? Or maybe it's a what, but who do you think that is? The biggest impact on Canadian federal policy over the last 12 months. This year, have you guessed? This year, it's Premier Legault being named Policymaker of 2021. Might surprise some of you. A familiar voice on CJ 8800 has penned the piece for the Institute that explains why Legault deserves this accolade. Dan Delmar joins us on the line, of course, a Quebec-based political commentator, former journalist and newspaper columnist, and now the co-founder of, I believe it's Tinker, right? TNKR Media, TNKR Media, a public relations and content marketing firm. Dan, welcome to the show.
Hello, friends. Nice to see you, at least virtually alive.
Tinker? It's Tinker or
TNKR?
TNKR. Oh, that's way
it's the word's a little politically incorrect across the pond, so we use TNKR.
So listen, when I saw the choice from Macdonald-Laurier Institute, I said to myself, nailed it. Tell us, Dan, why he's the pick for 2021.
They came to me with the pick, and I thought it was just brilliant. I thought it was right on as well. It's certainly not the prime minister in this year. We had a federal election where he, I think, expected to have a majority government, and I think his influence has been slipping lately. There's no other huge figure that's taking up a lot of space on the federal scene. Aaron O'Toole is not getting the job done. And Francois Legault, and this is not an assessment of the policies. I oppose Bill 21 and 96, obviously, very, very forcefully. But it's just simply a sort of a constat, just an observation that he has become the most influential politician in Canada. And he has used that influence to the advantage of the Quebec nationalist movement, or at least part of the nationalist movement that's really focused on these identity questions.
Yeah, and Dan, listen, one of the reasons why I appreciate you is that you can separate the two, right? You can actually give kudos and accolades without saying, well, that doesn't mean I support everything. I do. I'm the split decision, by the way, as you've probably heard, right? I'm in favor of Bill 21. I'm against Bill 96. And I also say both of those have to remove the notwithstanding clause if you really want to back it up here. But one of the things that you've touched on is that Francois Legault has all the runway to himself. There is no pushback coming federally. Why don't you dive into that a little bit more about how Francois Legault has been able to take advantage of this situation?
Yeah, I will get into the weeds of Bill 21 because we'll spend the rest of the show arguing about it. It's still a non-starter for me, especially for liberal party people. I mean, it's in the word liberty anyway. It's the tactical aspect, I think, is very interesting, and he's taken this as far as really anyone has dreamed he would. Certainly further than the Parti Québécois would have imagined. And the interesting thing is that I bring this phenomenon back to the Harper nationhood motion, if you remember that a few years ago.
Uh-huh.
It was seen as sort of like a virtue signal. Maybe we're kind of trying to appease Quebecers by calling the Québécois people a nation without sort of making any kind of formal distinction. That led to a very much rhetorical shift among the Caquists and among Quebec nationalists, and certainly among the media, that really suggests that Quebec is its own nation. And the federal government, not being the most tactically able government in the history of the Federation, certainly when it comes to Quebec, just kind of looks at this and looks at the nationalist commentariat and, the usual columnists that we read, and they go, okay, sure, let's go with that. Maybe that sort of brand of nationalism represents all of Quebecers. That's, of course, not the case. There are plenty of Federalists in Quebec. There are plenty of soft nationalists in Quebec that don't even support Bill 21 or enhanced language laws. But a very superficial read of the province, I think, is tainting the perceptions, especially within both liberal parties, of where Quebecers are at. And I don't need a liberal nationalist party, personally. I'm not going to vote for the Quebec Liberal Party if they're going to be CAQ-like. I'm not interested in that.
Well, Dan, it's so interesting because I think one of the reasons why Francois Legault has been so successful is that I think he's taken away the oxygen from so many of his political opponents. And I sort of look back, I try and imagine the Liberal Party from 9 years ago, under Philippe Couillard, and I look at where they were on the political spectrum, and I kind of feel that Francois Legault has been so adept at taking so many voters away from that liberal voter of 2012, let's say, and then also, eating the lunch of the PQ. something has to be said about what a good politician he is and how good he is at taking advantage of situations.
Yeah, I mean, good in quotation marks. I disagree with his tactics. I think that countries need constitutions, and ours have to be applied even here in Quebec. So if you're not willing,
but that's on the federal, So Dan, I mean, I get what you're saying, but where's the federal government? Like, the federal government has gone AWOL, and what I feel is sometimes people like to complain about Francois Legault being a nationalist and all of that, and then what I feel they're forgetting is, back in the good old days, whether it's the Liberal government of Robert Bourassa or the PQ government of Lucien Bouchard, they're Quebec first. But luckily in Ottawa, you've got a big boisterous Liberal Party. You got Jean Chrétien fighting back, and now there's no fight back.
Exactly, and that's exactly what the Liberal Party of Canada should ask itself. I've said often, what would Jean Chrétien do? And I think that should inspire a lot of Liberals, because the fear is what exactly? That we're going to push back against Bills 96 and 21, and Francois Legault is going to call a referendum? He said explicitly, even to me personally on Twitter, that he'll never call a referendum. So it's not happening. What are they scared of? Can we please stand up for Canada? And no, it will not be a political liability. It's frankly embarrassing to see that we need John Tory of Toronto and others coming in to fight our federalist battles here in Quebec. The perception that Quebec is a place that is overrun by nationalists of the identitarian variety is simply false. I grew up north, as you know, Elias, in the country, and my riding went back and forth between Liberals and Parti Québécois for the entire time. So let's stand up for Canada a little bit. Quebec voters are sophisticated. They know the difference between provincial and federal jurisdiction. And let's actually offer something that offers a solution to this so-called secularism debate that's not so cruel.
Of course, riding high in the polls is Francois Legault still. Of course, we'll see if the latest wave of COVID changes any of that, but he's still riding high in the polls. You write about Legault's best day in this year that was a good year for him. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I try to be as specific as possible. So I think that Francois Legault's power as a politician has peaked in late 2021. And I put the specific date. It's the date before the federal election, which would have been September 20th, I think, something along those lines. And I put it at that date because the moment Canadians started voting and the moment that those election promises go out the window, Quebec loses a lot of influence. And you'll recall at the end of the campaign, it was all Quebec all the time. I mean, there was the question controversy, the debate question controversy. There was all kinds of issues about Bills 21 and 96. Francois Legault was basically suggesting who Quebecers ought to vote for. And all of this political gravity was just centered right at Quebec. And the federal government just kind of, again, went right along with it. And to have sort of everyone, Liberals, Conservatives, NDP, going along with the nationalist media narrative, their outlook on Quebec, is just a really bonkers situation. And there are plenty of people, like Andre Pratt is one, who are Francophone and who are certainly Francophiles and who want to preserve the character of the French language in Quebec, who are not falling into this trap. And I think the Liberals would be wise to listen to the few open federalists that exist in Quebec media.
Yeah, and you know what? We touch upon the Liberals federally, but also, and Andre Pratt has had some great writing about this, the provincial Liberals. I don't know what they're thinking. I mentioned how I feel the CAQ is eating the Liberals' lunch on the provincial level. And I think it's because right now this Liberal Party doesn't know what they stand for. Left on so many issues. They don't stand up for, the federalism option at all. They're going to vote for Bill 96. To me, such a head scratcher. Dan, as we wrap up here, who do you liken Francois Legault to in sort of the historical context, maybe even recent history for Quebec as a nationalist leader?
I think if we look at the Quebec nationalist movement lately, that is to say sort of the one that became the sovereignist movement, at the beginning of that movement, I'm putting René Lévesque, of course, as the father of that movement, pretty uncontroversially. I see Francois Legault as the successor in a way, the person who's closing up that movement. So I think we're in a transitory period. I think Legault will have a similar impact to René Lévesque, but on the back end of this movement. So I think that's where we're at right now. I think Quebec is barreling really towards a very multicultural and yes, a francophone multicultural society. this is the nightmare scenario that the Mathieu Bocotés of the world have been blogging about for many years now. They're worried about the Quebec nationalism shifting to something that's more cosmopolitan. So that's, I think, what's going to happen. And so I think he's basically today's Lévesque, just at the back end.
Dan, Delmar, you should come back on this show more often. Great talking to you, man, and a really interesting piece that you penned after the Macdonald-Laurier Institute came up with their pick. Really interesting stuff. Thanks so much, Dan.
Thanks, guys, and thanks to listeners as well. I'm sorry I can't be on in the afternoons this year, but hopefully in a little bit.
Dan Delmar is the co-founder of TNKR Media, public relations and content marketing firm.